everyone. Thank you very much for being present here. We are about to share with you a couple of things that we have been working on during the last couple of, let's say, weeks, especially weeks, mostly last week, but also over the last month. Okay, so this is, I guess everyone in the room knows already, possibly most are here for that reason, knows already what's going on, or has at least some experience of what's going on in terms of how AI is developing into a new family of applications on generative AI. What we have been doing at Wise Parrots is not surfing the hype, at least we try not to do it, but is to producing value on it, through it. And that essay has been developing into a complete framework. That's what we're going to share today. And that framework that we now call it version beta 1 point something, is workable on clients, has been testing, and is ready to go to the market. So, starting from the beginning, we have been seeing AI applications, such as obviously the hype ChatGPT, offering endless possibilities in terms of how we can create assets of content, whatever the type of content is, especially over the last 4 or 5 months, and evolving fast. It seems to us that generative AI, for some reason, is developing at a much faster pace than anything else that we have seen so far. From internet to computer, mobile revolution, social media explosion, whatever, even blockchain. So it is a much faster change than we are used to. We normally think that we can adapt fast. But even if we don't think about it, normally we live through revolutions that take 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, some even 7 years to develop. That's why we call it digital transformation, how we can evolve companies, business, technologies, models over the years. This is changing much, much faster. As you, I think, know, and some of you guys already also experienced. So, how to use these tools is a new discipline, because it's going to change our lives, change our businesses somehow, but certainly change the way marketing is going to be done, or is being done. The change is not new. We have been seeing that marketing has been mixing itself with characteristics that were not there before, like data and tech platforms. And from segmentation, we evolved to audiences and all those things that we know already have been there for quite some years. But now we are experiencing a moment where this type of application talk a little bit like humans. So they are much more, in some sense, near us. They can develop languages that talk with us, which for a marketing team may be challenging, especially because end consumers and any other person will be able to use it fast and easily. The thing is that it obviously brings a new way of looking how we can produce value with this. So first of all, there's a big change in pace of AI evolution from AI modeling to generative AI. And that is not obvious. So AI has been developing over, I don't know, many years. Faster over the last years, obviously. It's going to be developing over the next years, so certainly. But generative AI has been exploding over the last few months based on a certain number of ecosystems that have some applications that grow much faster in content creation, especially in content creation. So, and that's not obvious because we think AI, it's like everything is changing at the same pace, and it's not. So we as humans are not prepared to make that adaptation fast. So typically in those situations, what we as humans do or as professionals do is we may go very fast and do lots of errors, or we may be a little bit more conservative and like avoid to do certain things to avoid risks, and then we don't join the train of change. So both are wrong. How can we use the best of fast-paced development, controlling the risks? That challenge is what we have been trying to solve. So yeah, we see AI much more like we all have been seeing this discussion. Will AI change people's work, or will it substitute people? Will people lose their work? So we see it as an endless opportunity of making people be superheroes through AI. Use AI in a way that turns themselves into the superheroes. We have to know how to do it, because if we don't, we possibly will end up doing wrong things at some point. That's for sure. And it's going to happen. As a matter of fact, it's happening already. So if we don't use a framework to do all this, at some point risks may be bigger than benefits. So we may be faster, but if something goes wrong in one of the, 10 assets that we're producing, it may be a bigger loss than the value that we're producing over the speed of those actions. So it is obvious that we should use some kind of framework and risk control, right? I mean, companies have sometimes even risk control departments. So it is obvious that they should assess risks and know what they're doing. They don't. They have no idea at the moment what's going on. Most companies don't know how their employees are using these platforms for content generation or content mashing or whatever is the content production, or using content to get it better and better. So this is obviously an opportunity that we have seen as a structured way to do better. So these are just some examples on how we can avoid problems. It has been there for all our lives as humans. If there's a risk, we just don't do it. We forbid any person to do something. Like Italy has banned ChatGPT, and many companies, especially in Germany and Switzerland, are now forbidding the use of, first it was ChatGPT, and then it's another set of tools. And then some of them just say, okay, any AI not allowed application, because there's so many that it just cannot be in the pace of forbidding any of these applications. So do you think that this is a good solution? I don't think this is a good solution. I don't think it's even a solution. It's just a way to avoid problems without knowing how to use the best of things. We just avoid them. So this is some data of Portuguese companies, employers, that are using this type of tools. If you ask their bosses, they have no idea. They don't. It's not that they think it's not being used. They don't know. They just don't know. They know if they themselves use it. They have no idea if their teams are using it. So 89%, so mostly everybody is using some of these tools, okay? The use of rules and frameworks is near 0%. And we also asked people, do you at least have an idea on the risks that you have? Which types of risks do you have? And do you somehow try to avoid them? 30% did, and so yes, 32%. So most people don't even think about it today. They will, but they don't today. So it's a challenge that we have to address, not only in solving the problem, but highlighting the problem first, because most of these people don't even see the problem coming up. And the ones that do just do it, they don't allow people to use it. So the thing about these type of tools and the way of how marketing is evolving over the years, and is going to be changing over the next 2 years or 3 years, is so different, and the pace will be so significantly different that we have just to address it in a different way. What we should not do is just the two extremes of doing nothing or doing it all, just blindless and going like crazy, experimenting any other thing, especially if it's company data that we're using, and worse, if it's end clients data that we're putting in. Not to mention government or military, okay? But at least company or consumer data, okay? So there's lots of risks in all of this. So the temptation is to go to the extremes, which is exactly the only places that we should not be. So how to address this is how can we go fast, catch the train, experiment, and get AI ready for what's coming up, but controlling the risks with the framework. That's basically what we have been trying. So first thing that we have addressed is, okay, which are the main risks? Like the types of risks that we have here some examples. Some of these are maybe evident to most people when we think about it. If we did not think about it, they were not so evident or obvious, but they're obvious when we think about and we ask, okay, which are the types of problems that can occur, like fake content and things like that. We have been seeing it in social media, but some others are not so obvious. We have developed a team that has been working very intensively on this over the last 4 or 6 weeks, and we have been talking with clients and leads and companies and peers and other agencies and associations and tech companies, and we have been seeing lots of things that are happening now. For example, just to mention one, we did see a marketing manager that is quite senior that has put all his strategy into not one but 2 platforms, expecting the platforms to give him an output to share internally, which is basically these platforms they expressly say, we learn with human feedback. This is how we learn. It's not just data. We learn with you guys. So we should know that when we put data, we are feeding the algo, which, if we know how to do it, may not be a bad thing, but if we don't, or even don't think, we just don't know what may or can happen. Typically, somehow it will happen. So, how we see these things is, how can we work with AI? And when we mean we mean people, obviously. How can this fusion work? We see it as a complete, not compete. So that discussion that mostly media is bringing up all the time, because obviously, as you know, journalists are also creators, so they are also worried, and it's quite legit that they're worrying about their work. But that discussion of how are we competing, it's just almost, let's say, nonsense all the time. Most of the times it's just nonsense. It's losing time. The right question is, how should we complete each other? How can we, when can we, how can we address it? Use AI in workflow that makes an end solution better, faster, cheaper, more accurate, and with more scope of solutions, without errors that may harm us or our clients or end consumers. That's how we have been addressing the idea of creating a framework. And let me tell you, and I think this is really important for everybody in the room. We have here some people from our team, some clients, some curious people, some people from OpTech, and it's really important that we understand how we address this and why. Because there is no single framework out there existing in universities, in academies, in associations, in other companies, in tech application companies, not even the ecosystems like Microsoft and Google have ecosystems, not even them have frameworks for people to use it. They have basically best practices for some applications that they want to sell. That's okay. That's okay, but that's not enough, is it? So that's why we address the idea of creating from scratch a first version of a framework to use with AI, with this set of tools. So the idea was, how can we create something that allows for both things to get the best of results, to make the results evolve themselves, to think about how can we use different tools, how can we produce consistent, not only good, but consistent outputs in between teams. How can we do all this, get the best and fastest ways to work with it, at the same time managing the risks, avoiding the risks, or at least controlling and mitigating the risks that are plenty. We talked about some here, but there's plenty more. Okay, so the mix of this ended up in the creation of a structured framework that was produced by a team that is here near me, and that basically is a team that mixes creative people with data people. So that idea that we will evolve marketing into data only, and then from data to AI and tech, is far from truth and will not happen. What will happen is the mix of different transdisciplinary skills used in what we call orchestration. That brings obviously new ways of working, but needs obviously data knowledge, tech knowledge, and some kind of how can we framework this in model of work, but also how can we use humans not only to deliver content quality, but especially to have most of their time with a much more elevated value proposition, using the best of their brains and the best of their creating model. So in the mix of this, we also thought about, look, we don't want just to compare tools, because there's AI tools for everything. There's even AI tools to control AI tools and AI tools to compare AI tools and things like that. And there will be more and more. But the thing is, are these tools prepared for business KPIs? They're mostly not. They're mostly prepared for characteristics, performance based on tech. Okay, so because also business depends on what we want, who is the client, what's the industry, what's the phase, what do we want as an output of our strategy today. So this is a glimpse of our framework. I know it sounds a little bit overwhelming, and possibly we will not be able to explain everything today, but the idea is that we all have an idea on how this is going to work and how it is working now. So first of all, the framework has 3 levels, and this is level 1, is the most simple, because it's a picture of everything. Okay, so model 2 will have like a framework for each part of this, and layer 3 will be a playbook of documentation for each step that we can use. When we say we mean people and AI. People or AI. It can be both, and it's going to be both at different levels. So in very brief, going to try to be brief in this. We have this world that brings us all this ecosystem of opportunities and risks that we have been seeing. What we have done is create a first loop of what we call tech mapping, where we will have all these, let's call applications or tools, AI based for creation of content. They all have a certain type of characteristics. They produce a certain type of content with certain rules. They can be private, they normally belong to an ecosystem. It can be open source or not. It has lots of different characteristics, utilizations, privacy rules, etc. So it's a data model of what these tools can do, which is basically changing all the time. Okay, so not only by versions, but by the way that they evolve with each other when they work together. So that's basically our loop number 1. And then the loop number 2, some people call it prompt engineering. We decided to call it the art of prompting. It's a little bit different, and the difference here is that it not only considers the architecture and the engineering, but it considers also some art characteristics inside. So it will use and need some human intelligence. So the art of prompting and tech mapping will be, if you want, will be a set of playbooks that allow us to do the rest all the time. So that's, if we want, the loop number 1 and 2. They are not oriented for projects. They are independent of projects, okay? And then we have what we call the orchestration, which is loop number 3, where we will repeat all this in each project. Depending on the project, it will have different levels or number of prompts or whatever, but it has a set of things that can happen, may happen, will happen, that have a certain order, and that allow us, possibly you don't see this, but allow us to mix different AI tools with humans in the orchestration after first idea of what's the creative idea and the creative concept, which, by the way, can be decided either by humans or by AI based on a brief and a problem. And then from here, we will evolve into an execution of prompt and reprompt with a certain logic and framework inside it. Now, how we prompt and reprompt, it's based obviously on a thing that is basically the first, probably best prompt, based on playbooks and based on the briefing, and then reprompt it. It will come to be someday a sustainable thing also, because we will be charged by prompt. So as much more seconds of prompting we will use, as much more we will pay. So a little bit like cloud space, we will want to optimize it. Not by the difference of taking 1 second instead of 3 seconds, but because it will cost us some resources, at least money. Or let's say it will be possibly money. So how we do it, it must be in a somehow smart way to optimize the number of prompts until we have a solution that is sufficiently enough to go to the final cut. Now, the prompt itself, this part of execution of prompting and reprompting, I'm making this very easy because I'm assuming that we're using one AI application, and mostly we're using 2 or 3 or 4 together. So there's quite some alignment here in changing how can we use this data from one application to the other. When we do it, and when we have a solution that we think it is usable, and let's be honest, it's not possibly going to be one solution, but multiple solutions for most proposals, we will go into the final cut, and this final cut is going to be done mostly by humans. It's okay to say that they may use some AI tools, but it's going to be basically done by persons that will do some final edits, some final customization, and all this work of getting it into the variants also. How can we go into variants that deliver to different asset types? All this is done after the loop of AI creation with the best logic to make it happen as fast as possible. Okay, so there's plenty of things in each of these boxes. I obviously will not go into second layer now, but it's important to mention that after the final cut, we then go into a human risk management control, which companies don't do today. They don't. Some agencies or some persons that are more accurate in use of tech will do it ad hoc. We'll look at it and see, let me check if there's something here that may be a risk for the purpose that I'm using it, but not with a structured way that allows to lower the risk in a structured way. So we here have a mix of 2 things, quality assurance and risk mitigation, and from there corrective actions to get it done into a solution that is getting the best out of what we want with risk control. If it's not possible, it will come back. So if these actions here of correction are not possible to correct some type of risk that we have, we'll have to go back to reprompt, okay? This is using AI and humans all the time. And then from here, and this is quite also different from what's being done, we want that all this gets into a publication that then gets data that is gathered in a central way to allow us to evolve to the next project. So from one project to the next project, we'll have more data. And this data here, it is not application data. It is business data. It is results data. It is KPIs achievements, or whatever is the purpose of what we want to achieve with the creation that we have been done. Now, sometimes it's just not direct, it will be direct, sometimes it will be indirect, but the purpose is that we have this data. And then we have here also a loop of how can we learn with new risks that were not there before listed and that we have been seeing happening in our projects, on other people's projects, or wherever projects, that we can bring into this list to make this framework better as it grows. Okay, so basically we have here a complete structured framework that is obviously a first version that is going to evolve from here. And I will not go into detail. If anybody has some questions in the Q&A, you are free to ask. But the idea is that we don't focus too much on the execution level, but to really understand that we somehow need a way to have a structured way to do this better. And again, there is no other framework that we have been seeing and we have been researching so far. So, getting a little bit faster now, we did some problems and tried to bring some solutions to these problems over the framework. So the first is, there's an abundance of tools. There's like, we're seeing here, there's 1,000, like 2,000 applications, or almost 2,000 applications now. How can we know what to use, when to use, which are credible and not? Do these apps have ethics inside? Now, we can guess that Microsoft or Google have at least worried about this. And they do have what we call inside app ethics control. We don't have super app ethics control because we are using many apps differently and bringing data from one app or one tool to the other. But when we look at this, we also see that we have to have a solution that is allow us to do some mapping here. Now, the idea that we have been working on here is not that we as persons or as company are able to map all the 2000 all the time. This is just not, I mean, it's possible, but it's just not our work. So what we have done is do a first draft and incorporate data from crowdsource to get it better and better. And we obviously have focused in the, let's say, 10, 12 most relevant and used apps, especially the ones that open APIs for systems that bring other tools working with it. So number two, individual complexity of these apps. How can I work with it? I mean, I can possibly, if I'm working every day with ChatGPT, I can get a sense on how to work with it sometime. But if it's 10 apps and I'm not working with the 10 apps, how can I do it? So the idea here is to create a playbook that allow us to be significantly smart and consistent using a way to do this type of prompting, which obviously is going to evolve. But the idea is not that we use like things that possibly some of you guys have received or seen on the web, like there's a list of smart prompts and the others are just stupid prompts, you know, like these are the goods. You may buy it. There's 1,000 of it. Just only costs 100 euros. Buy it from me. That seems strange, right? Maybe an accelerator if you need this fast, but it's not the solution. So the solution must be something that is structured in a way that evolves all the time. So how can we do this? And also, how can we incorporate here in this stage one thing that is not coming from most apps, which is the business data-driven evaluations, not just tech evaluations, characteristic, performance, but business driven. How can this be good at producing value for our businesses? So the third is people or AI for content generation. You have been seeing this for quite some time. So this discussion is going on. So we have been seeing that discussion. It's our vision, but to be honest, this has come a long way before us in this logic of the perfect mix of people with AI. We can call it fusion, we can call it cohort, we can call it whatever, but it's intercomplementation. Not one and then the other, but over the workflow, both of them all the time. Now, at the moment that we're living, what's developing is generative AI. We are not living in a world of AGI yet. We possibly will go into AGI someday, so let's wait for that day. Now let's concentrate on where we are. So I'm telling this because in the face of generative AI, we people do the framework, control the flow, and decide where we go, where we're there, and when AI is there. It's not so clear that it's going to be like that in AGI, but again, let's wait for that moment. So the results are difficult to measure, so we need the AI apps evaluated by people. So how can we do the best out of this stage? We basically have produced a solution that was not there before, using data. And basically what we have done here is using our experience in digital to push that same logic and data into digital, pushing that same logic into an analytical framework that will get data from the use of this framework to make results get better and better over time. And that we can measure them and know how good they are for the purpose. Not only how creative, but how good they are based on that creation for the purpose that we have produced. So the data privacy, the ethical risks, all the other risks that we mentioned, there's lots bias risks, there's lots of different risks. We have been seeing images like this over the last few months. So obviously some deep fakes, but most important, I'm not sure if it's most important, but also important, how AI, for example, see terrorists. So if you look at this, if you ask an AI tool to join the Pope with terrorists, it will come with 4 images, and they are all Muslims. So there's a bias here. Obviously, people that have produced this AI tool did not want the app to get biased, to act in between terrorists and a certain religion. The problem is that the tools learn with humans, and they learn on how we think, and they base results sometimes on how many people think in a particular part of the world, in a particular part of the moment, of the time. So this is the risk that we may have, obviously, if we start. This is an obvious example that a normal person would see, I cannot use it, but there's others that are not so obvious that if we don't have a framework may occur at some moment. So what we have produced is a framework of ethics and risk management control with some guarantees inside that we want to be controlled in a supra app logic, which is if I'm using 3 apps, I will not only have the ethics of the app guaranteed as a principle, that's obvious, but also I will have a super app control at the end that guarantees that these problems are not there, will be mitigated, will be controlled, and the risk for the companies is going to be lower. It's going to exist as it exists today, but they're going to be lower. So this is how we see the framework on the first level. If you want, very easy way to show it: tech mapping, art of prompt, orchestration, risk avoidance, and aftermath with data production, and then the logic of how can we produce which type of results. So, I mean, this is obviously not valid statistic data that we can say it's going to happen for predictive future, but it's results that have come from testing and show us how fast it's getting better with the use of a framework with this type of tools. Now, maybe this is not so obvious that everything is possible. It's also because everything is possible that there's deep fakes and other bad things that may happen and we have to control them, but it's also how can we do great things that were just too expensive before. They were possible, but I was like, before I was possibly going to search for a certain, I don't know, photo in a stock place and edit and tag it and change it. It was just impossible to imagine a photo designed in my head from scratch and have it produced exactly how I thought it. I mean, it was possible, it was just too expensive. I would have to like get a photographer a place and do all these things, which most of the times are just not achievable. So there's a lot of new things that can come from here. So these are some of the framework benefits. Some are obvious, obviously the efficiency, and we talked about also the risk control. But for example, the logic of standardization, it's not so obvious. How can we, if we have a bigger team, try to get consolidated, more, let's say, consistent results over time with the use of a framework that allows for maximum scope of creation with consistency, which seems opponent to each other. So this drives into how companies can benefit from it. And there's one thing that is maybe, I think, obvious, which is we want to go faster, to have better results, be more competitive, doing creation. And I think we have to address it, we have to consider it. But there are other things that are also really relevant and maybe not so obvious. I would say that apart from risk control, I've talked about it 3 times. So one thing that is really, really critical is how can I turn my company into more AI ready? So the AI-driven culture is going to be something that we are going to be listening for the last, I don't know, next 10 years. Okay? Like we have been listening to the digital transformation, digital mindset, changing people to digitization, all this for many, many times. Possibly, mostly everybody here is either digital savvy or digital native. So, but out there's lots of people that are still not digital first. So how can they evolve to an AI-driven culture? How can we get our companies into getting savvy in working with AI? Not only producing greatly, but also managing the risks, knowing what's going on, knowing the best way to try to predicting what types of problems may occur and how can I address them is a new, if you want, a new discipline that has to be accelerated fast, especially in companies that want to avoid that trap that some of them lived before in this digital transformation, thinking, oh, it's going to be a tech thing. So I will put it on the budget for the next year, and then it's not happening because budget doesn't allow it, and then the next year I finally do it. I think I did it, but it was just a tech step, and then the mindset and the process take another 2 or 3 or 4 years to change, and then we have like 5 or 6 years to make that transformation. And sometimes we even lose our best digital people in the way, then we have to produce new knowledge digital. So all this has happened and is happening in the digital, so you can imagine how it will be with AI. Because guys, some of you guys are digital first, are digital native, but nobody here is AI native. They are now kids, these guys that are AI native. They are going to be AI native. They will never know how it was before AI. So for some of us, it's the first time that we're doing transformation. We don't sometimes think about it, but it's going to happen. And this fast pace, speed of generative AI inside AI development is, as I mentioned before, not so obvious and has to be addressed in some way very fast. whatever is the way, very fast. Otherwise, we will be just seeing news on the media and discussing the hype of ChatGPT or the problem of the deep fake of the Pope with Kardashian or whatever. We'll be on that level of, a bit of gossip, a bit, some critics, and oh, that's just stupid to use. And we'll be there like, well, maybe this is not so relevant after all, because it's just producing some crap spread over the social media. Nobody will buy it. This is just another way of creating a new risk for ourselves. It was called marketing myopia before. So this myopia of not seeing what's going to happen has been here all the way through from time. This marketing myopia of not seeing what's going to change, how fast it will change our marketing and our way of doing and producing news of way of working from brands with consumers. So this is how we see it. It's obviously how Wisepart sees it. Why choose us in the services that we're producing? I'm going to show a little bit also which type of service we see ourselves do from this framework with brands, with partners. So some of these are obvious, others are not so obvious. So just to mention that we have been seeing like typically content, because ChatGPT was so great in talking humans science that we like do it every day. So text is under the radar. I think photos and image creations are now under the main radar. Videos are also getting into, not quite so evolved now, but they're there. You just have to see what Adobe has done lately and other companies. But there's all types of other creations. Anything that we may think, from emojis to any other thing that is a creation, is be possible to do. Okay? Do you remember me telling you that there was a marketing manager that has put the strategy of companies into applications? The idea that he had was, I want to produce very fast one template with 3 slides that resumes all these for an executive summary for an M&A and acquisition. So how can I create this fast? I will use these tools to do it. And he was fast. Just wasn't good, but it was fast. So just to mention that there's all types of potential creation types that we can use here. And opportunities are endless if we look at them in a new way. So until today, we were, for example, just to give you some examples, we were looking like brand books. How should my brand be treated in a marketing ecosystem? The logo, the tagline, the colors, the way they are being used. Is it flexible? Is it not? So this is obviously the foundational thing that is going to stay there, but it's just not enough. We have to be able to tell AI agents how our brand thinks, how its culture, its tone of voice, what type of character has our company, our team. Because if the AI agent doesn't know this, it will act just averagely like any other company. So at some point, we will want some personalization for some things, and we have to have brand books that have this tech stack of information, snippet of AI preparation, to allow us to use it, or even to allow agencies and third-party players to use this thing at some point. Okay, so just some creations, just to give some examples, because you have been seeing slides and slides of text. So some images, just 2 examples of briefing. We have here one solution that we used without framework first and with framework after. You can see some differences. Here we have highlighted differences of customization and photoreality. Here we are seeing some difference. This is maybe an obvious difference, but if we look at this and we ask people that don't use these tools every day, they won't believe that these people just don't exist. they think. It's based on a photo and has been edited somehow. It's not. It's a creation. So how we use, in this case, it was even not very complicated because it's based on text prompt only and not mix of different content types. So if you look at this, you will see obviously some differences. Now, this was an example that our team used for an example of a client, and I think we did bring it because we think it's even funny that when we say some things, we can see the prompt here, coffee cup on yellow background, steaming fresh espresso Canon camera. The AI agent decided to put the Canon camera on the plate, which is kind of funny, right? I mean, but obviously that's not that. The main point of this is not that, is how can we evolve from a particular solution into multiple better solutions that allow our results to be better, okay? So we didn't bring it here, but we have some examples that we produced for a particular alpha situation where we have really big prompts, like you cannot read it. Oh yeah, like machines can read it because it's just too boring to go through it, you know, it's just too big. It's produced for machines, okay? But it includes inside some data that is not so obvious on description, but comes to guarantee other things. And there's a certain logic of how to do it to get the best done, just to mention this. Okay, so how do we see our services? There's 4 services that we're producing here for potential services. Team training, so it's basically training. This is for companies that want to have a set of training on get their team ready for this, or at least with minimum requirements to then get ready, okay? At least that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is it's capability building. And I would say that this is possibly the most important one from my perspective, which is how can we help brands have a project with us with a joint squad where some people from our team that know how to use the framework and some people from their team that know the business work together during some months, not only to produce better assets, but especially to get better and better at using this in a structured way. And the output should also include company regulations, which most companies, almost all companies, don't have today. I mean, we asked some of the top 20 companies in Portugal, 5. Nobody of these 5 does have today these kinds of regulations because it is very new and they don't know what to put there and how strict they should be, okay? So this way of working will have an output on getting those also better and better, using all this opportunity of new ways of doing marketing with a certain logic and with a way that allows for better results, but especially also, and again, not so obvious, AI readiness on the team, which changes mindsets. And we have seen it before. What changes companies is not tech, it's mindset. I mean, we need tech, obviously. But normally when we do have mindset, tech will come. But if we have tech and we don't have either processes or mindset, it will be cropped by people. It will not go, okay? So this, I mentioned some AI-ready assets like brand books and others, snippets of code that can be used for different purposes. This will be, I think, also a new way of producing value for brands. And finally, maybe the most obvious, how can we produce this content for brands? Which is also a solution that allows the team to manage quicker, cheaper, cooler, better, but with, again, with risk control. So, to finalize this, and sorry that it took me so long, we are going at Wise Parrots to do a better go-to-market with 4 companies, and only from there we'll go massively into the market, okay? We have selected some clients that obviously wanted also to do this, to do a go-to-marketing over the next 4 to 6 months. Some project will be 4 months, some project will be 6 months, to get a better version, to get a better traction, and to allow us also to distribute this information inside WisePirates to more and more people, to allow us to be accelerators of AI readiness in the market. So that's it. Thank you everyone for your patience. I hope you enjoyed it.